This is Delhi. Please stand by for our next program. This is All India Radio. In our national program of talks tonight, we bring you a panel discussion entitled Jalandhar, the Cradle of Literature. The panelists include Dr. Bhupender Aziz Parihar, renowned educationist, poet and polyglot, Dr. Ramnita Sharda, Associate Professor, Media and Cultural Studies, Dr. Ujjwaljit Kaur, also known as Ujjwala Bhati, Assistant Professor, English and Cultural Studies, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, and Dr. Sharad Manocha, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
Good evening, listeners. I'm Sharad Manocha. We are here for a panel discussion on the topic Jalandhar, the cradle of literature. Steeped deep in mythology and history, Jalandhar has always been a cultural hub of the region. The city is supposed to have been founded by Devasya Varma, also mentioned in Vedas. It also claims to have been an important city in the reign of Love, Lord Rama's son. It's part of the famous Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilization. Later on, it remained part of Ghazni Empire, followed by Mughals, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and later became a very important British town with a well-established cantonment. However, in spite of a turbulent past and numerous upheavals, Jalandhar continued to remain a cultural, spiritual, and a literary hub. A home to the oldest classical musical festival Harvallabh Sangeet Sammelan, the city has sired numerous sons and daughters who have made their indelible mark on the cultural, artistic and literary firmament. Be it K.L. Sehgal or Master Madan or Amrish Puri or Yash Chopra or Jagjit Singh or Hansraj Hans or Inder Kumar Gujral, they all have spent their formative years in the city, which also happens to be a cradle of literature. The world of literature in the subcontinent just cannot ignore Jalandhar's contribution. Given the scope of this program, we cannot go too much back in history, but would try to keep our focus on the most prominent men of letters from Jalandhar. Novelists, poets, dramatists, short story writers, you just name them. Jalandhar has produced them all. In English, Hindi, Punjabi, as well as Urdu. Our research for this program unearthed almost half a century of these word magicians, beginning from Lawrence Durrell to Padma Shri Surjit Patar, from Hafiz Jalandhari to Josh Malsiyani, from Professor Mohan Singh to Dr. Varyam Sandhu. The list is almost unending and steadily expanding. In this brief program, we'll try to discuss a few of Jalandhar's men of letters whose works are loved, admired, and respected. We have in studio an eminent ensemble of erudite panelists, Dr. Bhupender Aziz Parihar, and an educationist, a scholar of English, Punjabi, Urdu, Persian. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Ramnita Sharda, Associate Professor in Media and Cultural Studies, and she has translated quite a few of prominent writers. You are welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
The third and final panelist is Dr. Ujjwaljit. She is an assistant professor in English and Cultural Studies at GNDU Amritsar. She writes poetry. Her specialization is linguistics. She also dabbles into short story writings. So we are going to have a very mixed kind of a panel. Since Jalandhar has been home to English writers, Urdu writers, Hindi writers and Punjabi writers. So all the languages and almost all the genres have been there in Jalandhar. I think we should start with Urdu or English. And I would request our senior most panelist, Dr. Bhupender Aziz Parihar, to shed some light on Urdu poets or Urdu writers from Jalandhar.
When we talk of Urdu culture and literature in Jalandhar in specific, it has a Persian background. In the pre-partition days and centuries, Persian was the chief medium of instruction. When Josh Malsiyani, I had the good fortune to be his student from 1970 to 74, he simplified Urdu poetry. He was not only a poet, he was a critic and he had a school of poetry. He had so many disciples, Sahir Hoshiarpuri, Rishi Patyalvi, Puran Singh Hunar, Naresh Kumar Shad, I have seen and heard them all recite their poetry, and they were in the classical mold. Hazrat Josh Malsiyani was a disciple of Mirza Dag Dahlvi. Dag Dahlvi is known for his simple language. One day in the evening, I went to Josh Sahab for my lesson, and he was humming Iqbal's famous verse, भरी बज़्म में राज की बात कह दी, बड़ा बेअदब हूँ, सजा चाहता हूँ. I said, you have written, Josh Sahab, Iqbal ki khamiyan. You have objected to his iambic pitfalls. He was a master of prosody. Josh Sahab was a master of Urdu prosody. He said, no, that's a different thing. Poetry should be like this, simple and profound. And Josh Sahab, the Sharh Diwan-e Ghalib, he annotated for the graduate students Diwan-e Ghalib. It is one of the pioneer works. Ghulam Rasool Meher, Nazm Taba Tabai, Bakir, and others came much later. So I think his Sharh Diwan-e Ghalib, annotation of Diwan-e Ghalib, is a seminal work in Ghalib hermeneutics. And his Rubaiyat Nagma-e Sarosh, he began with Sarbada-e Josh, Janoon-e Hosh, and then came in his later life his collection of Rubaiyat. And the introduction to it is so exhaustive. I was wondering that he has included all Rubai writers in Urdu. Tilok Chand Mehroom, Josh Milihabadi, Firaq. He has talked of all those people. Those research scholars interested in Rubai may go to that introductory part of Josh Sahab's contribution.
Could you please recite some of his famous rubais?
I wrote this book for Sahitya Academy. I will quote some couplets only. Rubaiyat volume. बदगुमा हूँ तुझसे उम्रे रवां, सच बता मुझको कहाँ ले जाएगी. जाम लेकर कहा ये जाहिद ने, देखना कोई देखता तो नहीं.
क्या बात देखना कोई देखता तो नहीं. The simplicity.
He was a classic, yes.
The simplicity.
This was his credo as a poet. Credo in the sense, a poetic verse should be like prose. It should read like prose.
It should read like prose, but should have a rhythm and a lot of
Yes,
profound
it is.
meaning in it, even in the simple words.
His metrics was very strong. He was a staunch classicist. मौत ही इंसान की दुश्मन नहीं, जिंदगी भी जान लेकर जाएगी. मेरी बातें सुन के वाइज ने ये कहा, कोई इस काफिर को समझाता नहीं.
क्या बात है.
क्या बात.
Tonalities of his verse, it's a very बहरे बेकरां जैसे कहते हैं, an endless ocean.
Well, about after Josh Malsiyani, Dr. Bhupinder, would you like to comment upon some other Urdu writer from this region which really influenced or
In
was...
passing, I will mention Arsh Malsiyani was his son, a poet, a humorist, editor of Ajkal, who sat with Josh Milihabadi and Jagannath Azad. They formed the editorial board. So his ghazal is very famous. कभी इस जहां से गुजर गया, कभी इस मकान से गुजर गया, कभी उस मकान से गुजर गया, तेरे आस्तां की तलाश में मैं कहां कहां से गुजर गया. It's a very famous.
Yes.
It's sung also.
It's sung also.
It's my favorite also.
Oh, that's
So
very
next writer I would like to mention in specific is Pandit Melaram Wafa. From Lahore, Sialkot and other places in this struggle, he came over to Jalandhar in 1935. And for the rest of his years until 1980, he was here. His two poetry volumes are Soze Watan and Sange Meel.
Soze Watan and Sange Meel.
And he was a freedom fighter also, a militant in that sense. I will recite his poem for which he was imprisoned to rigorous imprisonment for 2 years. These A Farangi, he addresses the British rulers. ए फरंगी कभी सोचा है ये दिल में तूने, और सोच के कुछ तुझको हया भी आई. ना मुबारक था बहुत हिंद में आना तेरा, कहता आया तेरे हमरा बला भी आई। तेरी संगीन ने चमकने लगी सड़कों पे यूं ही, लब पे मजलूमों की फरियाद ज़रा भी आई। दर्द इफ्लास का नेज़ों से किया तूने इलाज, मौत बनकर तेरे हाथों में शफा भी आई.
Wonderful.
So this is included in Zabt Shuda Nazme, which is India's archive.
So as we move from pre-partition India to independent India, language suddenly shifted from Urdu to Hindi or Punjabi. Even the language was almost same, the script shifted. And then we had writers coming up in Hindi. Upendar Nath Ashk, another Jalandhar, is a famous writer. He started as an Urdu writer, shifted to Hindi. And then Hindi also became a language of the masses in Punjab, in India. So we now have Dr. Ramita Sharda, who has something to say about the contemporary Hindi writers who have made their mark from Jalandhar.
In fact, I had thought that I'll start with the Upendar Nath
Ashk.
Sharma ji.
He was Sharma.
And he
That
had
was
that pen name
pen
of
name.
Ashk. I was surprised when I started reading about him, and I found that he started writing, as you said, in Urdu, and his short story, which is very famous, Aurat Ki Fitrat, the foreword of the same was written by Munshi Premchand. Then he was motivated by Munshi Premchand to write in Hindi. And that's how they said that he started writing in Hindi. Some of the very interesting aspects of his writing are that he was a very close associate of Sadat Hasan Manto. It was a strange love-hate kind of relationship.
It's a kind of a rivalry they had
Yes.
when they worked for AIR
Yes.
Delhi.
Yes. And Manto Mera Dushman is a print sketch that he has written on Manto. And in that he talks about an incident. He says that when I went to Mumbai, Manto was sitting right across me. And all of a sudden he said, I think I like you. And then he said that in the very same evening, everything changed. And he said that there is this ritual of when a Hindu dies, there's that Kapal ritual where the skull is broken with the stick.
With a bamboo stick.
So he says that when he dies, when Ashk dies, Manto will perform that. I hate him so much.
Unfortunately, Manto died before him.
Yes. But this is the kind of relationship, this is the kind of literary relationship also that they shared with each other. Now, coming from there to, as you said, I should be talking about the contemporary writers. I think when it comes to Jalandhar and when it comes to Hindi writing, it is Dr. Ajay Sharma.
The upcoming writer.
Yes,
No.
yes. He's a
Fiction
prolific writer. He has written 15 novels in Hindi.
Some of them have been prescribed by the university as well.
Yes, 5 universities to be precise.
And a lot of doctorates or
MPhil
works
thesis,
have been done.
yes. 29 MPhil thesis have been done on that. What intrigues me most is that his writing includes the most recent themes, like COVID-19.
Yes, he wrote a room
Kamra
number.
number, yes, room number.
That was probably the hospital room he was.
Kamra number 909. At hospital room where he was
treated when he was stuck with COVID himself.
Yes, he was a doctor as well as a patient. So he has the story of both the sides. And in this particular novel, he talks about the relationships, he talks about the fears, the apprehensions, and the expectations of the trapped people. How relationships are laid threadbare, and how the final retribution finally comes from the acceptance of all that is. It is basically COVID leading to a kind of a nirvana.
Yeah, revelation. Some
Yes.
kind of a revelation.
Yes,
Means
yes.
that when you are all alone and you feel that you are not going to survive, the world is also suffering through this unknown disease.
Exactly.
And you have that feeling what will happen. And he has very successfully penned that.
Existential crisis.
Existential
Yes,
crisis.
yes. In fact, this existential crisis is seen in most of his novels. There is very famous novel of his, which is Basra Ki Galiyan, Streets of Basra. Now, that is the most critically acclaimed work, and it is unique in more than one sense. It is unique because the subject is unique. It covers a period of about 17 years.
It's about
Iran
the
War.
petrofiction. He gave a new genre to it. It's called petrofiction.
Yes. No, petrofiction is Sheher Par Lagi Aankhein. That's their
Okay.
novel. Basra Ki Galiyan is about Iran-Iraq war, Gulf War and UAE war.
In fact, it was that petroleum war that led to this
Yes,
kind of. He was
yes,
there, I
yes,
think. He was
yes.
there in
At
Basra.
that time, he was there in Basra. And what he foregrounds is a very mundane kind of relationship. There's a person called Akash who goes from Jalandhar to Basra, settles there, and 3 times he gets converted. Once from a Hindu to a Muslim. Then from there, from Iraq, he is taken to America. Then he becomes a Christian. So that identity crisis of all the people or the youth who are moving to other countries, he talks about
In
them.
a way, means Dr. Upendar discussed about Josh Malsiyani. That
Yes.
was romanticism, philosophy, and here we come to the contemporary problems
Yes.
that are being discussed. And I think, the same things have been expressed in Punjabi as well.
Yes.
The philosophical kind of our problems or the questions that hound us. So, Dr. Ujaljit, so you have opted to say something about the Punjabi writers from Jalandhar. Who has been your favorite?
I feel that Punjabi poetry from Jalandhar along with Punjabi short stories. So post partition, I feel they have actually carved the literary ethos of not only Jalandhar city but complete Punjabi literary scene. Today, among modern Indian regional literature, the names of Avtar Singh Pash, Surjit Patar, they have registered indelible imprints on poetic traditions of modern India. So, along with the poetry of Pash and Surjit Patar, I am taking their names first because they have made a mark on the national scene.
They are the
In fact,
harbingers and
Harbingers.
Indian literature.
right. But otherwise, Punjabi poetry post-partition have been experimenting a lot in this region.
Yes.
From progressive poetry of Professor Mohan Singh,
Singh,
and then stage poetry of Nandlal
Noorpuri.
Yes,
Noorpuri.
Nandlal Noorpuri, his film songs. Then we have modern poetry of Jagtar. In fact, Jagtar, like Roland Barthes, he moves across all the traditions. So from modern to experimental to absurd poetry as well. We have Ravinder Ravi in experimental poetry, then Ajaib Kamal in absurd poetry. I'll later on come to Surjit Patar. You asked about my favorite poet. So yes, Patar Saab is my favorite poet. But in the short story also. So Kartar Singh Duggal's fiction writing, then Kulwant Singh Virk's writing on partition. Particularly his story Khabal. Everyone, I guess, who is into short story reading has read this story. So Varyam Sandhu's writings on 1984 issues. Then Prem Prakash's writings, he talks about the different kind of social, like his story Lakshmi, it talks about the social stratification. And thereafter, if you talk about Bangla also, Bangla has been shown on TV also multiple times. As kids, we've been seeing Bangla on TV. So these short story writers as well, I would say, they are very capable descendants of Manto and Ismat Chugtai and the Urdu tradition of Jalandhar. Currently, if we see Jalandhar, then these short story writers and these modernistic traditions, avant-garde traditions in poetry, they have carved a niche for themselves in the literary traditions of not only Punjab but on the national scene as well. So talking about Patar Sahab. So Patar Sahab, the most beautiful part about him is that he recites his poetry.
He recites his very well.
Yes, and beautiful voice also. And he is actually having a persona of a poet. The way he's such a sweet personality as well. So
his subjects also.
Right. So he also delves with romance as well as progressive writing.
Writing, as well as deep philosophical thought.
Deep philosophical thoughts as well. So I began my readings and listenings of Patar Sahab as a student. Finally, when I also started writing, I mean, he was there somewhere in my subconscious, like that kind of writing. His poem, I mean, now also in my classes, in my poetics classes, when I teach linguistics and poetics in the department, and I do give examples of the poem like कोई डालियां चो लंघिया हवा बन के असी रह गए विरिख बड़ी हा बन के. The metaphor of tree, the way he has
used it.
So I mean that is like he is a
recurring theme.
Yes, I feel, I mean, like it's a Yeatsian.
It's a Yeatsian, or it's a connect with the nature that he sometimes feels that it's being disconnected or severed.
Yes, nature as well as, I mean, the way brick is watching everything. And the same time it is standing and observing.
Can't do anything.
Yes. So and that was probably, I mean, situation in Punjab also, long spell of terrorism, a long spell of extremism. And though Patar Sahab himself wasn't involved in it directly, like let's say, I mean, Pash was. His sensibility.
His sensitivity and sensibility,
yes,
as an astute observer of the things that were going on.
And the lyricality of Patar's poetry, that is again exceptional. That is again, I feel, a par excellence currently. Like Batalvi, who is considered the prince
Punjabi poet.
Yes,
The Punjabi
poet, the Keats of Punjab. So Patar Sahab, I feel, carries that tradition.
He certainly carries that tradition.
Yes.
In fact, they are trained poets in the matrix of poetry.
Now they know
They can write ghazals. Pash couldn't write ghazals.
Right.
He wrote in Baudelaire and Rimbaud and Lorca tradition prose poetry only. That is an outcry, an outburst.
Everybody is not trained for everything. Means the writing is something that mostly spontaneous.
And Shiv, they are lyrical because they are trained in the meters. Finger,
They could experiment.
They could experiment within those
the limitations as well as the restrictions that they could work under.
Ghazals are wonderful.
So in fact, Patar Sahab also translated Lorca.
Lorca.
Yes, he also translated Lorca.
Yerma and Lorca.
Brecht as well. He has been writing other things also, but the poetry was so overwhelming that like it overshone everything else.
Again, I personally feel that he could be very simple and very deceptive.
The gentleman poet.
A gentleman's poet, like a Frost, he
Deceptive.
would deceptive, like Robert Frost. And
Frost is very deceptive.
I remember when he got his heart surgery done, that famous lines he wrote, "Ke je dil khol lende yara de naal, na kholna penda o zara de naal." So he wrote after getting his bypass surgery done. Had they opened it with friends, and that is the modern tragedy these days, that we have 5,000 Facebook friends or 5,000 Instagram followers, yet we are all alone. So that's the kind of alienation that we are now suffering, that he wrote so beautifully in those two lines. So we have been through poets, we have been through novelists, we have been through the short story writers also.
The contemporary, I think, fiction writers in English, we could talk a little about them also, because nowadays, there are people who are writing serious kind of fiction and what might be termed as kind of
cerebral fiction.
Yeah.
Cerebral fiction.
So there is Dr. Narendra Neb, who is
he came up with a Punjabi novel as well as
an English novel, yes. And Mr. Rahul Saini is variously published. He's come up with 5 novels which are full of humor and which cater to the needs of the youth, I would say.
Yeah, in a way, means Jalandhar is still carrying on the tradition that it inherited long back. So it means these young people are carrying that flame, the torch of literature further. So I must be doing injustice if I do not name. One writer was named, that was Kartar Singh Duggal, as we were doing our discussion. We are here because of Kartar Singh Duggal. He was founder, director of AIR Jalandhar.
Right.
And I, as a student, was influenced by a short story of him that was Miracle. We
Okay.
must all have read that story, Miracle.
Yes.
It's about the story about Panja Sahib and how the train was stopped there, which was carrying. So that was kind of a miracle that even you can explain to your students that miracles do happen. It's not something that happens only in the mythology, or miracles do happen. And Tar Singh Duggal wonderfully depicted that scene or that kind of a miracle in that story.
Dr. Manoja, I would like to add here the final thing, that the establishment of, as you are talking about, the establishment of All India Radio here. So similarly, the establishment of Doordarshan here, number of press
Publishing houses and media houses.
and media houses which are there. So I mean, this kind of institutional atmosphere which has been created in Jalandhar, that has also added a lot. And as you're talking about it, that carrying the tradition, these are the institutions which are carrying on that literary tradition in the city. And this is the demand and supply situation. Here you have the supply. So people, the students of Jalandhar, the youth of Jalandhar, they are
some kind of a role
yes,
models
They
to
are
fall back
inspired.
upon.
They are motivated to, indulge into literary things.
So before we finished off, round it off, I must not forget to take one name, that is Sudarshan Faakir. Again, AIR Jalandhar's product.
He is a product of.
He's a product of AIR Jalandhar. He studied political science at DAV Jalandhar, and we all know him as the most famous poet whom Padma Bhushan Jagjit Singh sang. He was a constant companion to him. So he was philosophical, he was romantic, and he could be even devout. So Hey Ram, that he wrote, Hey Ram,
Yes.
that's a household name, or wo Kagaz ki kashti wo barish ka pani. No, that was
सामने
wonderful.
है जो
जो सामने है वो
उसको बुरा
बुरा
कहते
कहते हैं, जिसको देखा नहीं उसको खुदा कहते हैं, जो सामने है उसे बुरा कहते हैं. And Sudarshan Fakir's claim to fame came when he, as a young poet, insisted Begum Akhtar to listen to him on her visit to AIR Jalandhar in 1968. He insisted, he persisted, and then Begum listened to him and got his ghazal recorded. And that ultimately led to Sudarshan Fakir's fame.
Now you have mentioned the films. I would like to say something about Nandlal Noorpuri also.
Wonderful lyricist.
Means his songs have become
Wonderful
the
lyricist.
have got the folk status. के
right.
मैनू मेरे दियोर दे विआह विच नच लैण दे,
Right,
शौंकड़ मेले दी.
right.
They all have that again Jalandhar tradition. So I hope this tradition will continue in the coming years, decades, and centuries.
Yes.
So as we have inherited, we will also give something to the coming generation. Thank you, Dr. Amrita Sharda, Dr. Bhupinder, and thank you, Dr. Jaljit. So it was wonderful talking to you.
In our national program of talks tonight, you were listening to the panel discussion entitled Jalandhar, the Cradle of Literature. The participants were Dr. Bhupinder Aziz Parihar, renowned educationist, poet and polyglot, Dr. Ramnita Sharda, Associate Professor, Media and Cultural Studies, Dr. Ujjaljit Kaur, also known as Ujjwala Bhati, Assistant Professor, English and Cultural Studies, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar, and Dr. Sharad Manocha, who initiated and moderated the discussion. Conceptualized by Naveen K. Gupta of All India Radio Delhi, the program was produced and presented by Muhammad Imtiaz of All India Radio Jalandhar and came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.